Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. We are talking about food inflation. Food prices are rising and are likely to rise further. In addition to that, there are some other concerns about what could happen if a monsoon does not make its appearance the way it is supposed to or the way we expect, and that's really what we are looking out for. The larger question, of course, is the government prepared for this eventuality, and is it getting its act together, and will it do the right things to ensure that food prices don't skyrocket again? Joining me, agriculture economist Devendra Sharma, economist Shubhada Rao will be joining us shortly, and with me, of course, Cricket Wala. So Ayaz, someone was telling me that the government was, the whole slogan was "Achhe Din Aaye Hain" and all that. Someone told me, a family member told me just this morning, that where is the Achhe Din? The prices of onions have already doubled in the market.
Yeah, so it's like a batsman coming in, taking fresh guard, and being first delivery he gets is a beamer.
Yes.
It can be very, very disorienting. So more seriously, I think this is the first big challenge. It's come very early for the new government, and remember, food prices, inflation was one of the big issues heading into the elections.
Right.
All the other things came in later, but this was corruption and inflation were the two big, driving issues. So now the Modi government is being confronted with the issue of inflation straight away.
Right. Okay, Devendra, before we come to the solutions, and we will talk about some of them in a while, can you take us through or walk us through the nature of the problem as we are facing today?
First of all, I like that comment about cricket and inflation or the government's way of working. I'm sure Mr. Menon would agree that sometimes when the opening batsman gets out on the very first ball, doesn't mean that the team is going to be out or lose the match. So I suppose this government also is definitely facing fast bowlers now, but can really withstand the pressure and sail through. I'm sure that they can do it. Now, why I'm saying this is that the crisis is quite clear to us. The more worrisome that I see is the next 3 months, because those 3 months would mean that there will be less of rainfall, which of course is very clear now. And I'm only worried that the drought doesn't strike some parts of India. That will be a disaster, because agriculture is already under distress, and I'm worried about the millions of farmers who hang out or who live at a salary or an income which is less than 2,500 rupees a month. I think with that kind of economic situation, it will be a disaster if the monsoon fails, and so therefore that's what there has to be a number of steps which need to be taken to really ensure that the livelihoods are not lost. So having said that, the impact on inflation, the impact on GDP, of course, is something that a lot has been said and discussed, but that is the most worrisome part. But the good part now, if you allow me, is that we have huge and ample stocks already with us, food stocks. About 62 million tons of wheat and rice is already with us. So on that food front, that's a positive note, that we are settled with good stocks and we don't have to worry. But of course, it will depend upon how the monsoons behave.
Right. So, Devendra, can you, for those of our viewers who are going to watch this now or later, trying to understand the genesis of the problem, the genesis of food prices not coming under control for a long time. This is not, it's only spiked now, and it's hit a 5-month high. I'm talking about food inflation, but the high prices have been with us for a while, and we've not been able to get a grip on this.
Well, I think if I can repeat what I've been saying for quite some years now, is that there was never a crisis of food shortage in this country. Whereas some of the economists were telling us there is a supply-demand constraint. I've always been saying there was no supply-demand constraint, because we had abundant supply in this country. And now, if there is a problem with inflation, you're not able to control it. Don't blame the farmers. Don't blame the supply side. So there was something else happening in this country. The previous government, of course, was completely, not bothered, I would say, because they were always telling us, wait for another 3 months, wait for another 6 months, and then 5 years went by. Now, this government at least has got it cracking immediately as they took over. I think that's a very positive note. Now, the problem here is this year. Let's look at the food situation. We had a bountiful monsoon in 2013. We had a huge, production increase this year. We are close to about 260 million tons of food grains. We are also producing about close to 300 million tons of fruits and vegetables in this country. There is no food shortage in this country at all. So why are the prices going up is quite evident. There is somebody in between the farmer and the consumer who's exploiting. These are what we call as market sentiments. These are what we call as speculators, holders, whatever it is, because they've got used to it for the last 5 years. So they're merely going to go ahead and make the best out of it.
Devender, are you also saying that I mean the figures that you gave obviously indicate a very high supply, a supply overhang, if you might call it that. But does that automatically translate into pressure on prices in terms of keeping them down, assuming there was no middleman problem?
Just see, last year when we had the onion prices going up to 100 rupees per kilo or exceeding 100 rupees per kilo, you recall there was a whole lot of noise that the production has gone down and so on. So eventually it was realized that it was found out that there was only a shortfall in production by 4.8%, and we see 600% the prices going up. There was no reason why the prices should have gone up at that level. Now, if you look at this year, it's very interesting. I have some statistics with me. If you look at Gujarat had 400% more sowing this year. 400% more sowing in Gujarat this year. And if you look at the other parts of the belt which produces onions, I'm talking of onions especially in this case, then if you see, Maharashtra, see Rajasthan, see Madhya Pradesh, there has been quite a jump in cultivation, the area under cultivation. Now, yes, there was a kind of after the hailstorms and the repeated rains did the damage. Even if that you include, because of the area expansion, there's no visible loss in production as compared to last year. So why are the prices rising now? Is a question. So, and I think if the government gets really cracking, there's no reason why the prices should be going up, as you said, 100% now. And I'm sure, as some newspapers are saying, they will cross 100%, 100 rupees a kilo in the years to come.
Right. So, okay. So you're saying there's no, and you've reiterated this point. There's no supply side problem. There is no, source problem. As in, food grains are still being produced, and that's not an issue that we should concern ourselves with. Then let's come to the next point, which is the intermediary, the point at the intermediation level, wherein I guess traditionally there has been a problem. Now, what is again ticked it off in this particular period that we are talking about, which is recently, and does that in some ways mirror what has happened in the past as well?
Well, Govind, if you go to a mandi in the morning, I would suggest that all journalists should do that. Just go at about 5 or 6 o'clock when the wholesale trade is trying to decide the prices. If you are in the market at that time, you are in the mandi, Azadpur mandi or whatever mandi you are at, you will see within that half an hour or an hour, the prices within the mandi, wholesale mandi. And if you buy just outside the mandi from that hawker, you'll find the prices have already crossed 300%. Or let's say on average, you'll find 200 to 300% increase right at that mandi stage. Now, I've always been saying, why can't we control that particular part of the chain? Why can't we ensure that the prices don't jump up the way they do it right at the gate of the wholesale mandi? Now that we are not doing it because there's a huge vested interest prevailing there, so nobody wants to do it. And then we go on saying that we need to remove APMC and so on. Now it's very interesting. APMC has been delisted yesterday or day before in New Delhi. There's a lot of excitement in some circles. Now APMC was also delisted in Himachal Pradesh, in Uttarakhand, and in Haryana in January. Have the prices come down in these 3 states? The answer is no. Ask anybody. You can have a kind of a SMS opinion or ask people to send an SMS. You will see the prices have not come down in these 3 states. In fact, in Bihar there is no APMC since 2007. Interestingly, no APMC in Bihar in 2007. Have the prices come down in Bihar? The only negative impact is that the rice farmer in Bihar, when he goes to sell his produce, he gets about 900 rupees per quintal as the price. In Punjab, which has the APMC, the farmers get 1350 rupees as the price. So if you want to remove APMC, you will turn Punjab farmers also as Bihar farmers. If you want to do that, it's your choice. But I think APMC is needed to be expanded in this country rather than dismantled, because there's a lobby which is from Reliance Fresh and Easy Day and Big Bazaar. They want to extract raw material or produce at a cheaper price. So they are the ones who are saying, and then there are of course economists who support that, saying that if you remove APMC, your problems are solved. Well, let's see. Only 7% of vegetables are traded through APMC. Tell me, what about 93%? Why are the prices not coming down? So there's something going wrong somewhere in the way we are trying to manage.
Even if they're assuming that the APMC impact, as you say, is limited, and the examples that you quoted, you quoted examples to that effect. there is still a hike happening and prices do even out at higher levels, right? I mean, it's not that, I mean, even across states, it's not like there is a sharp difference between prices of onions once they shoot up between, let's say, Maharashtra and Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh and so on.
No, if I get your question correctly, when the prices shoot up, now let's look at this particular season now. What I'm reading in the newspaper says that, because there was the prices of the seedlings or the seed has gone up. I don't understand how can that be possible, because only 1 month back we had a normal kind of a price situation happening, and now suddenly in 1 month the cost of seed has gone up. Can't be there. So I think what we are trying to do is, right, when the crop moves from Maharashtra into, let's say, Punjab, yes, there's going to be a kind of a jump that we'll see as far as the prices are concerned. But still, it's in the manageable limit that we have seen happening earlier. I have no reason to believe why are the prices going up. Let's say onion is a commodity whom the figures are still to be made available. But look at wheat and rice. Why are the prices jumping in the case of wheat and also in the case of rice when we have abundant stocks within the country?
So, Devendra, my question, I'm just trying to kind of decode what you've told us so far. So, the granaries are full, and even if there's a weak monsoon, it's not going to debilitate the food stock which already exists in the country. Is it a question, therefore, of managing how the distribution of the food takes place so that the prices don't escalate, or is it that there is a whole middleman greed factor, which whatever you do is going to kind of give you serious knocks while you go and try and purchase some food grains?
The basic question is food mismanagement, and the government therefore has to manage that particular chain or the chain right from the producer to the consumer. But at the same time, what you are saying is that greed mechanism which prevails, in between, as you rightly pointed out, is the factor that I've been saying. I think in this country, you need a danda to make that in between players behave. Otherwise, they will go on rampage as they have done in the past.
Right. So, Devendra, if you were to take a step further back, right? So, we are saying, okay, there is a problem somewhere between the point that the goods are produced, which is in this case crop, and the point that they reach the intermediary. So, why or what have we done so far as a country at the stage before it reaches the intermediary, which is the APMC in some states?
Well, you were right. I think that is what I'm saying. That there has to be a kind of a thrust which or focus drawn into this particular stage. When a producer produces a crop, he has to take it to somewhere to sell. Now, what is happening is, before the APMC was enacted in 1966 or 65, I think it was 66, when the APMC came and the FCI came, before that, the farmers were exploited ruthlessly by the trade, because every time they harvest, there is a production increase, and that's the time when the trade exploits the farmers. And that is what was happening in the past before 66. After 66, I think this was one positive decision taken by policymakers when they brought in the APMC or the mandis, where the farmers could go and offload his produce. There is first, they see, normally what people conceive is that FCI is the biggest carrier of food grains or the holder of food grains. Let me explain here also. When you take the produce to the mandis, the first player who should come into the play is basically the private trade. That's what is the rule. The law says that private trade can come and buy. If there is no buyer, then only the state steps in and purchases at the minimum support price. Now, minimum support price is fixed by the government because that's the assured price that the farmer gets, which is a little economical price according to them. But that price the government purchases. So the private trade has already, if they were keen, they can go and buy. But the point is, they don't want to do that. They want APMCs to go so that they can get at a cheaper price, more cheaper price, which is a distress price for the farmer. So that's what is the causal mechanism for all this misunderstanding that prevails in this country. Now, I am saying that we need to expand mandis in this country. We need to, instead of limiting or restricting or dismantling, we need to expand the network of mandis in this country, because you'll be surprised, Govind, only 30% farmers in India get the benefit of APMC price or the minimum support price. 70% farmers are already not into the network or into the APMC play or into the beneficiaries of minimum support price. So why the things are not moving in that 70% if the markets were capable of taking over or improving the life of those farmers?
So Devendra,
this is a question which should be understood.
Right. So Devendra, I can also, I guess this is where some of the other economists, including in agriculture, are diverging from your point of view. Ashok Gulati, for instance, I think said recently, I mean, he made 3 points. I mean, I think one is he talked about an urgent reform of APMC, which along with other economists. He also talked about bringing down import tariffs. I think he quoted chicken legs, milk, apple and garlic. I mean, garlic and chicken legs, for instance, have a 100% import tariff, and he talked about that, but he was talking more in terms of immediate steps to ease the situation. The agriculture minister has also talked about increasing food stock, almost 5 million tons of rice from state stockpiles. So, do you see some merit in some of these being undertaken as intermediate steps rather than, and then maybe we come to the more structural problems about how we improve the whole supply chain and the farm to market, the movement of goods from farm to market?
No, Govind, I want to share something because this is a question which is coming up again and again, and I'm sure you will like to understand the let's say the basis or the genesis of it. I remember one of the economists. I was on a panel discussion in 1996 when India imported wheat from Australia. A show which was anchored by Pronjoy Thakurta on CNBC. The question asked was, can India meet its food security need by importing food? And of course, you know my answer. This economist went on to say, if India can import petrol, why can't it import wheat? Now, please tell me, is that a sensible answer? If India can import petrol, we all know it is importing petrol because it doesn't have it. Now, you are saying that if India can import petrol, why can't India import wheat? I think this is a ridiculous and a disastrous argument. And this must be cut down right from the source where it is coming from. And that's going to be a disaster. I don't know. Even Jagdish Bhagwati and Arvind Panagriya have been saying almost the same kind of a thing. But I don't think they ever made this recommendation to American government. The moment that they would say this to American government, they would throw them out of the country. So that's the way I think we have been very kind to them. These economists who are coming up with these kinds of proposals that you remove or reduce duties to bring chicken legs from America. This is what, if you go to Ukraine or go to Kazakhstan or the other countries, it is called as bush legs, because Bush has been trying to export these chicken legs to these countries, and they are importing those kinds of legs from America. This is a byproduct, a kind of it's no use to Americans. Now, if you open up your market, you're actually destroying your own production capacities. We did that to manufacturing sector, and we now want to do that to agriculture sector. I think there can be nothing more disastrous than this suggestion that you import milk, you import fruit and vegetables at a lower price. What rubbish! You want the farmers to go out of production? Then who is going to produce? It comes back to the same argument that if India can import oil, it can import wheat.
Right. Okay. Devendra, I'm going to turn the thing around and look at the export side as well in a moment. Subhadra Rao joins us now from Chief Economist of Yes Bank. Subhadra, we've been talking about inflation as for a while now. We're looking at two kinds of situations. One is the immediate and one is the slightly less immediate, which is what might happen if the monsoon goes off. But at the immediate level, what's your take on what needs to be done in terms of alleviating the problem of rising food prices? Okay, I think we've lost Subhadra. She was on the line a little while ago. Okay, let me come back to you, Devendra. Let's look at the outward side, right? So there are two steps. One is, of course, increasing the minimum export price for onions from $150 to $300. We're also talking about other curbs. Now, does that improve or change things from your perspective?
I think this is also a classic example of what is called food mismanagement. I think this is a completely wrong thing to do, this ad hoc decision that, you raise the minimum export price at some time, then you reduce it later. I think this is completely not done. And what the government should be doing is that, you should have other measures to check the price rise that is happening in India. There is no reason why you should be raising those prices, the minimum export price, if you at one stage agreed to allow exports. So once the decision to allow exports have been taken, we should stick to it. We should ensure that the minimum quantity is exported, the one that is surplus with us. But at the same time, this kind of adhocism that you tinker with the minimum export price is not done and is completely something that I would never support. So I would be very keen that if Government of India allows that onions to take place, export to take place, there is no problem. But you tame the industry to tame the middlemen now. That's the role that the government should be doing it. So they have said enough, but they haven't done anything so far. In the last 5 days, I'm sure you have seen no action against any middlemen. And don't forget, last year when they wanted to go have income tax rates on the middlemen, they went on a strike. and they force the government to take back those kinds of things. So I think unless the government means really delivers what is called bitter pill to this the chain, nothing will improve in this country.
So clearly, Devendra, what you're saying is that the government needs to show very strong political will, because at the end of the day, as a consumer, the Aam Aadmi, the ordinary guy on the street or in the villages, is interested in seeing how much he spends for his next meal, or how much more he has to spend, and is going to base his judgment about this government only on that, not in the long run but in the short term.
I agree with you completely, and that's why I've been saying, Aziz, for a number of shows I have said this, that if I were somebody in power, I would have ensured that it would take me not more than a month to ensure that there is no food inflation in this country. You can do it, but all that you are not having it is the political will to deliver. And I think if you deliver that political will, and as we said in the beginning, Achhe Din Aayenge is not only a dream of the class of middlemen. Achhe Din Aayenge is also a dream of the poor, and that kind of class which has never had any kind of Achhe Din in this country. So I think it is very important the government must crack down on this trade, let the trade behave, and you will not see the kind of price rise that is happening at the present juncture.
Devinder, okay, I think Shubhada has come back, and we've managed to rejoin her. Shubhada Rao is the chief economist at Yes Bank. Shubhada, we're trying to understand, the immediate steps that are being talked about to arrest rising food prices and potential food inflation or higher food inflation. Are they sufficient? And if not, what more needs to be done in your mind? Okay, I think we've not been able to raise her again. So, Devendra, let me come back to you. I think so. We talked about the political challenges, right? So, we assumed that there were political challenges. Greater political challenges in the previous dispensation. But maybe there was a feeling that there is a bigger majority, stronger government, and therefore this government should be able to move faster. Of course, there is still time to demonstrate that. But is there something fundamentally amiss in this whole equation, which is why we are unable to get to the root of the problem as you've defined it?
Well, I think as you rightly pointed out, but let me also go a little bit ahead, because the previous government was actually dominated by the kind of a thinking which prevails, which is now some sections of the economic class are suggesting. It's the same kind of thinking that with macroeconomic whatever control, you can control inflation, which is food inflation, which I've always think is not possible. If you really want to control food inflation, you have to come down on the ground, take it. The physical control is very important as far as the entire chain is concerned. So I think that kind of economic thinking has to come up. And also in the earlier dispensation, we had the Montek Singh Ahluwalia kind of economic school of thought, which goes very well with the Ashok Gulati kind of school of thought, which says you should import food rather than producing food in this country. And I think that was one which was keeping them away from taking some tough decisions. And I think what this country needs is to produce food within the country. As Mahatma Gandhi had said, a country like India needs a production system by the masses, not a production system for the masses. I think that is something which somehow the economists have forgotten, because the training comes from the same kind of a school which is dominating the mainland thinking today. So I think that is what I think we have to move out of that ideological thinking and start looking at the ground at what is happening and how we can make a correction there.
So I think it ties in well with the new government's credo of Swaraj, actually. So there is independence from all these factors. As Devendra mentioned, that if you have a shortage of something, you can always import it. But actually, it's your indigenous produce which is in plenty supply, but it's obviously not reaching the people. I think that's really the crux of the problem, as I understand it.
Right. So, and talking about reaching the people, Devendra, let's address the last point, which is the Food Corporation of India and basically the management of public distribution system in this country. Now, obviously, that's a debate that can go on for several hours, but if we were to understand that very quickly in the current context and what can be done, how would you say that it's time to revisit the very structure and nature of PDS and the way it's distributed? Distributed as in the food grain is distributed.
I completely agree that we need to revisit the food security bill. That bill, I have been saying, was a missed opportunity. The NGOs who were forming that committee, the NAC, the National Advisory Committee, actually, I would say, didn't do a favor to the country by bringing up a law which I think was not going to be helpful in any case and not going to reduce hunger in the years to come. Now, why I'm saying this is because we have about 6 lakh plus villages, 6,40,000 villages in this country. I am looking at a situation where each village can become food secure. Each, let's say block can become self-reliant in its own hunger, fighting hunger. So I think that's the kind of situation we should develop, we should encourage. Each village becoming what is called village republics. They become self-sufficient in food, which means you reduce the dependence on PDS. Once you reduce the dependence on PDS, you actually also ensure that the financial outlay is reduced drastically, and also the corruption and so on that goes away. So I think there's a need to minimize.
So I don't want to challenge that on a conceptual basis, but let me ask a question differently. Has this approach worked anywhere else?
You mean to say in the world?
Yeah, in the world. I mean, the way at scale. I mean, in a large country where you're talking about self-reliant, self-dependent units producing their own food grain and being self-sufficient.
No, we have to see it from the perspective of you have a country where you have 600 million farmers. Add the middle class 200 more million, 800 million people, and you think there is a way to go on feeding them, 5 kilos or 3 kilos or 4 kilos? It can't be done. Now, you have to provide them the capacity to produce food for themselves. Moving them out of the villages into the cities and then providing them food is not the right way. Because once you move them out of the villages, what kind of jobs are we providing them today? Rickshaw drivers, auto rickshaw drivers, or becoming daily wage workers in the industry. If that's the kind of growth that we talk about, I think we are missing out the woods from the trees. So I think we need to refocus, revisit the entire paradigm of development. And I'm sure you will agree with me that you don't have to follow the American model or the European model in a country like India. You can create your own models. That is what I'm saying. There's a challenge for the economists to rise above to the occasion and take decisions which can really benefit the country rather than going by the same ideology which America followed by pushing people out of agriculture or Europe followed by pushing people out of agriculture. India can't afford to do that. So World Bank has told us, don't forget, World Bank had told us in 1996 to remove 400 million people out of the rural areas into the urban areas. I think that would be a disaster if you follow the World Bank principle.
So Devendra, the only assumption in what you're saying is that most of these people, the 600 million people, which is almost half the population of this country, who are in agriculture as we know it, would want to remain in agriculture. So that's the only presumption I think that you're working on here.
No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that these people are in the villages, these people are doing agriculture. Now the challenge for us is to improve agriculture. When you say we're going to develop skill development programs, why don't you launch skill development program to improve agriculture? Let these people, instead of making them learn rickshaw driving or auto rickshaw driving, why can't you make them learn agriculture, improved agriculture? Let them do agriculture, then join with the cottage industries or about a network of small scale industries. That's the way it should be done, rather than moving them out of rural areas. I also want money to go into their hands, or I'm not saying that they should perpetually remain hungry or poor, but that's the way they have to have a different approach to see how they can become economically viable, have money in their hand, and also run the economy in a different way.
And you feel that this is really the I mean, from your point of view, perhaps one of the few approaches or the only approach if we are to find long-term sustainable solutions to solving our hunger and food distribution problem.
I would tell you, like you or your colleagues, to visit a village called Hivre Bazar in Maharashtra. Hivre Bazar was a drought-prone village, you know that some years back. Yeah. Today, if you go to Hivre Bazar has 60 millionaires. That village has 60 millionaires. Well, why can't we create millionaires in the villages? Is what I'm trying to say. If Hivre Bazar can have 60 millionaires, you don't need to have only millionaires in Bombay or in Ludhiana or in Chandigarh or in Delhi. You can have millionaires also in the villages, provided you follow a different approach of development. That's the model that I am trying to suggest.
Right, Devendra, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for walking us through the larger structural problems, the immediate ones that we are facing right now, and the nearer term solutions as you see it. And surely you've been very enlightening to us in terms of what, as I said, the more structural problems in agriculture are and leading to food prices, and whether the larger question being whether the government is in a position to solve it. Ayaz, last word before we close.
Yeah, I think just the point made by Devendra, I think the issue, as you highlighted, is how to keep the people there in their farms. I mean, what is it that's going to, it's a question of lifestyle changes because the country is developing, and also, what do they get in return? Land prices have become so expensive, so dear, that they sell off the land and they come and become rickshaw drivers, as Devendra said, and then the money blows up And you know, so
Right,
I think these
yeah.
are serious challenges that have to be addressed.
Yeah, at a greater level. And Devendra, we'll come back to you and continue this discussion, since food prices don't look like they're going to be going down in a hurry, and the long-term structural problems will surely remain. Thank you very much for joining us on the India Hangout. We'll be back.